cooking. Yes, indeed, we're cooking. You and me, we're cooking. Cooking with Chef D.
Why do I like bread so much? The story behind the bread is that when I was 10 years old, my mom had 2 cookbooks in her house. She had Food That Really Schmecks and The Joy of Cooking. So one summer day, I was bored, so I looked through Joy of Cooking on how to make white bread, right? So I read through it. So I went to my local Zehrs, which is just kind of up the road, and bought flour, yeast, sugar, and what I needed for it. And I started making bread when I was 10. I love going back to making bread. There's something not relaxing, but it just kind of brings you back. And I love that you use your hands to knead it, and it takes a little bit of a practice to get it going. And then once you get it, it's a visual thing and everything that goes along with that. Love bread, love bread. A lot of times, we don't have a whole lot of time to make a starter for sourdough. So people ask, well, how can I make a sourdough that tastes like a sourdough, but I don't want to make a starter for it? I have the answer. So we have our organic flour, and yes, this is what I put my flour in, and this is an unbleached. That's what you want. You want to use an unbleached flour, and also to always look at the ingredient deck. You want to have the cleanest ingredient deck possible. So you can buy great flours at Vincenzo's, even look at your local grocery stores in the organic section or even in the regular flour section. You'll see a whole bunch of different ones, and we'll get into some Italian flours a little bit later for pizza dough and focaccia that are amazing. But I'm going to use an unbleached bread flour, so I'm going to take about 3 or 4 cups. Now, I've done this recipe for about 30 years now, so just kind of make it by eyeball. We'll have the recipe, the true recipe up for you, don't worry about that. So now with yeast, there's your regular, and you've probably all seen it, the Fleischmann's, huge name in yeast. Also, just want to show you there's Red Star. We have our active yeast, and then we have our instant yeast, which is again used for maybe pizza dough. It's if you want something that you don't have to rise as much, you use the instant dough. There's also yeast that's made just for bread makers and that, but we're going to do it this way. So I'm going to take just some regular yeast. This is about equivalent to 1 tablespoon of yeast. We're going to put this in, just like so. I'm just going to give it a quick stir. We're going to add a little bit of salt to this. Now, we're not going to add any sugar to this. Now, you do need sugar, and in ancient thought, or even earlier settlers who didn't have a lot of sugar, they'd use the water from potatoes because of the sugar from the potatoes in the water, and they'd put the water in with the bread and make their bread that way. We're going to stir that together. Just incorporate the yeast and the salt and that in your flour, just so you can see that. There's nothing fancy about that at all. We're going to add 1 tin of Waterloo Dark, and this is where we're going to get our sugars from. This is the from the beer. We're going to add the beer in. Just like so. Put this out. Then we're going to stir this together. Now, you're wondering, where are we going to get the sour for the sourdough in this? We're going to take some unfiltered apple cider vinegar. I love Nona Pia's, great story behind that, great people. Anyways, we're going to add probably 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. You can add a little bit more if you like, if you're a little bit more of a tang. Stir that together. And so you're just incorporating it in right now so that your dough gets nice and wet. Oh yeah. And then the other thing too is a lot of times we see dough and we make it too dry. You want it to be sticky, especially this, because we're going to start off with it. And then we're going to add just a little bit of water. Now I have a lot more here than what is actually needed. We're going to add about half a cup of water. Stir our water in. Just like so. And this is how easy this is. You just kind of incorporate it all in, as you can just see. Stir that over. And the great thing about making bread is you can get the kids involved in it, you know, and make it a total family affair. Or grandkids. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to place this on my counter, uncovered for probably about a good 2 hours. Then I'm going to put saran wrap or cling wrap over it. Then I'm going to let it sit for 24 to 36 hours. And you're going to see lots of bubbling going on, and that's okay. That's what you want. There's no proofing. We're not going to have it, you know, you don't want to have it in a really cold area, not for this recipe, but keep that in mind for another one coming up. But you just want to put it in, and then the air like we have yeast all over. So that's going to help raise our dough and give it that extra little punch of flavor. And away we go. So 2 hours, then we're going to put some saran wrap. We'll come back to this, and you'll see it in just a couple minutes. I want to know how we make beer. That's why I brought you here. We're at Waterloo Brewery. I'm with Alex. Alex is going to take us through the whole process of how we make beer, right?
Yes.
Alex, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay, so what do we have behind me here?
Okay, so this is the hopper. It's above the mill that sits right underneath it. So this is where we put all the grains for the recipe before we mill it.
So milling, is it like kind of blending it together?
Yeah, so it like crushes up the grain to
Okay.
expose more of the inside so that we can access more of the sugars. Once it's milled, it's moved
Yep.
over to the mash tun over
Yep.
here. And so you can see we have a batch going right now.
Yep. So
You'll
that's
see
the mash on top then, right?
Yeah, so you'll see the mixed grain depending on the temperature of the water and the temperature of the mash.
Yep. And how hot would this be right now?
So right now that's getting towards the end of our mash cycle.
Okay.
We have multiple temperatures starting from the low 50s up to 78 right now.
Celsius, right?
Yes, Celsius.
Okay. How long is it resting in there for?
It
Or
depends on the brew,
Okay.
but usually between an hour and a half.
Okay. So we take it from the big bag colander, and now we're coming over here.
Yes.
So what's happening over here now?
So this is our kettle. This is where we boil the wort, the sugar water that we got from the grains in the last step.
I can see it kind of doing its thing here.
Yeah, so right now it recirculates through an external boiler.
Yep.
And this is when we add our hops.
Okay.
It usually boils for about 60 minutes.
Okay.
And depending on when we add our hops, we can get different properties out of them
Yep.
in the final beer.
So like the difference between an IPA and a Pilsner and a dark?
Yeah.
Now, would there be hops in the dark beer?
Yeah, there would be a little bit of hops
Okay.
in the dark beer for bitterness.
Okay.
So any hops we add at the beginning of the boil
Yep.
will provide bitterness to the final beer.
Yep.
And then hops that we add towards the end of the boil or even in the next vessel will give more of those citrusy and fruity flavors that you get in, say, an IPA. So this is what we call the whirlpool.
Yep.
After the boiling step, everything is transferred into this whirlpool vessel at through a pipe that's tangent to the vessel itself, so that we spin all of the liquid in a circle. It's kind of like if you swirl a cup of tea,
Yep.
and you get the tea leaves and stuff separated or gathering in the center.
Yep.
Does the exact same thing. So we spin everything that was in the kettle in here, and then that allows the hop and protein matter that we no longer want
To be sifted away.
in the next process
Okay.
to be separated out.
So after you separate it from here, where do we go from here?
From here, it's cooled down
Yep.
and pumped into our fermentation.
And how long
tanks.
would a normal beer, or does it go on like between an IPA? So let's say regular Pilsner.
Yeah.
How long would that be in the fermentation stage?
In the fermentation tanks for Pilsner would be a little bit longer
Okay.
than, say, if we were doing an IPA or the
Okay.
dark.
So from start to finish in a bottle, How long
Yeah.
would that process be? I know, again, depends on the
So this whole process before we cool it down
Yeah.
takes about 6.5 hours.
Okay.
And then it's in our fermentation tanks anywhere from 2 weeks to a month.
Okay. And then you take the yeast off, you check isn't it the block or something like that?
Yeah, so we followed the sugar amount
Yep.
at each step of the way so we can see it converting sugars to alcohol. And then, of course, everything is tested in the lab at
Exactly.
the end of the day to get exact numbers.
Perfect. Well, brother, thank you for your time today. I really
problem.
appreciate it. We got a whole idea and I have a better understanding of how it all starts. Thank you.
Great.
Hey, welcome back. We're making bread. And so now, how many of you love pizza? Put up your hands. You know, truly, that's one of my guilty foods is pizza. And I love making the dough for this. And this dough, it's a recipe, and you know, being a chef is just a license to steal. So you steal somebody else's recipe. And this is Peter Reinhardt's Napoleon dough. So it's, you know, that thin crust and that chewy edge. This is how you make it. And actually what happens with this dough is you're actually fermenting the dough. And we talked a little bit about the yeast on the last segment. And this is exactly how with working with the yeast. And it's going to be another long process. It is a 24-hour process of making this. And we're actually using 000 dough from Italy. More gluten in it. It will stretch. It works out perfect. It gives it that nice chewy texture. You can buy it at, like I said, you can use President's Choice. They have a black label, 00. You can go to our good friends at Vincenzo's. They have it there and try it out. It does make a difference, the flour that you're using. So we're going to use 4 cups of flour, and I already measured it out for us. So we're going to put this into our mixer. Once you have the flour in the stand mixer, add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of baker's yeast. Turn your mixer on low and incorporate all the dry ingredients. Then slowly drizzle in a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and after that you can begin to add in some of the ice cold water. Using ice cold water will create a dough that rises more slowly with smaller bubbles. Once the sticky dough has formed, continue mixing on low to medium speed until all the dough pulls away from the sides of the bowl and you have a uniform ball. And again, continue to knead that in the mixer for about 2 to 3 minutes. Now, again, using a stand mixer, you want to use a stand mixer. You know, we've been using Kenwood for a long time because their engines are very powerful and the dough is not going to break them down very quickly. So you want to use a very powerful stand mixer when you're doing this. And it's just going to start coming away from the sides. This does take a good 1.5 minutes to about 3 minutes. And just wait till it all starts to incorporate before we start adding any more water to it. So it's been 5 minutes of letting the dough in the mixer incorporate. Everything's come away from the sides, as you can see. Now we're going to turn it off. Oh yeah, it's nice and chilled. And then what we're just going to do is we're going to take a couple small pieces off, just like so. Put it on a parchment lined, or, you know, one of those baking liners, unstick. We're just going to make our little balls of dough. And then we're going to let these go in the refrigerator for 24 hours, like I mentioned. Then we're going to roll it out and we'll make some amazing pizza with it. We'll probably use some cornmeal so it doesn't stick to the pizza oven. Out of this recipe, you'll get depends on how big of pizza that you want to make. You can make the dough balls bigger if you like. I like making them nice and small, so they're about, maybe an 8-inch when it's finished pizza. And the great thing, after you let it rise for the 24 hours, you can put it in the freezer, and it'll keep up to about 6 months in the freezer. Just put them in a Ziploc bag or wrap them in very tightly in some saran wrap, and you're good to go. So we're just going to put these in the refrigerator. We'll come back to those in just a little bit, but we're going to finish up quickly making some focaccia. And this is so easy. So we're just going to add our instant yeast in. And we have some, like again, the pizza flour is what we're looking for. I have a little bit of sugar, because you need the sugar for the yeast to react. And again, you want this to be a lot lighter, and you want it to be that it's going to puff up. Where the pizza dough, where we just mentioned, we don't want. So we're going to add 3 cups of flour. And like I mentioned, you can buy this flour at any of the local grocery stores. President's Choice has a really nice product, and our good friends at Vincenzo's. Again, just to incorporate this in. Just a touch of salt. Now, just a wee little bit of salt in this, because we're going to add salt at the end. We're going to start adding our water. Just a little bit at a time, and then that way you can see that it's incorporating really nicely into a nice dough. And just slowly start incorporating in the dough. And as I mentioned at the top, this is where you get your hands dirty, you get your hands involved in this, and we're going to knead this out. Just add a little bit of flour on our surface, not a whole lot. And then we're just going to do the down and back motion, incorporating in a little bit of flour. And you want it to stick to your hand a little bit. You don't want it too dry, like I mentioned earlier. If you're having a bad day, you can just work a little bit harder on it. Take your frustrations out. Now we're going to let this rise for about half an hour, and then we're going to roll it out, put a little bit of salt bath on it, a little bit of olive oil, put it in our oven, and we're going to have some amazing focaccia. Won't you join me? So it's been 24 hours. Not really, but you know what? It's magic of TV. So I've let my dough rest in the refrigerator. You can just see they're just nicely little balls here is what we're looking for. And you can put it on parchment paper. If you don't have parchment paper, you can always use a little bit of wax paper. We're going to put a little bit of flour on our counter. Not a whole lot. Just kind of go around. And then we're going to roll it out. And this is what I said to you earlier, that it can be smaller. You can make it, I like about an 8-inch pizza. So we're just going to roll it all the way out. Again, it doesn't have to be perfectly round. And then if you want, you can just stretch it with your hands. And no, I can't throw it up in the air and do that. But if you can, all power to you. So then what I'm going to do is just grab, I have a little bit of cornmeal here, my wooden paddle. And this just, the cornmeal kind of acts as a little ball so that your pizza dough will roll off and into the oven perfectly. So we're going to put this on. Made this one just a little bit big. That's okay. We're going to take a little bit of tomato sauce. And you know, you don't have to use tomato sauce. You can use whatever you like. A little bit of cheese. And then we're going to go to the oven. So in the summer, we wouldn't normally put the front hood on our pizza oven. You have enough heat going, but because it is January, we do. So we're just going to gently put our pizza in and just see how it just rolls off really nicely off the board. So we're changing from the wood paddle to a steel paddle so we can move our pizza around. Now you just want to wait just a little bit, again, because it's not as warm as in the summer. It's going to take just a little bit longer. Usually this takes about 90 seconds to cook. Here in the winter it will probably take about 3 minutes. And you can start seeing now that it's just coming together in about the 2.5 minute mark. Our back pizza starting to rise up just a little bit more. We've just taken the pizzas out of the wood-fired oven. I'm getting ready to cut the pizza.
Thank goodness there's a chef in the neighborhood. Thanks, Chef.
You're welcome. Nothing like having a neighbor drop by. You never know what's going to happen out here at the studio kitchen. Simple, easy, as I mentioned to you earlier, it's a nice simple crust, 24 hours, you have perfect eating. Oh man, that's really good. So our dough is risen for the focaccia. I just, again, put a little bit of flour on. You don't need a whole lot. And remember I said to you that you want the dough to be a little bit sticky, so I always put a little bit of flour on my fingers, and then that way the dough won't stick to your hands. It's going to stick a little bit, but not a whole lot. And then out that comes. Oh, it smells amazing. A little flour on top. Roll this around. And then we're going to take it, roll it out. Now we don't have to roll it out too far. And you're going to see lots of air bubbles in it. That's okay, because we're going to get our hands into this big time. So again, if parchment lined baking sheet or reusable lined baking sheet, if you don't have that, just make sure you spray your baking sheet with lots of olive oil. Well, we're going to put a little bit of olive oil on the bottom. We've preheated our oven to 375. It's a convection oven, so you want the air to move around. Let's move this on like so. Take our dough, just like so. And then we're going to take our fingers, just kind of put it through. Now, if you wanted to, you could add rosemary to your dough when you're actually making the dough ball and just give it some more flavor that way. Or you could even put some Parmesan cheese in the dough and it tastes amazing. It's like anything, there's many different ways to get the end result. You can change that. Now, I have some salted water here. We're going to add some salted water on, because there's nothing like that salted, beautiful finished crust on your focaccia. And then what we're going to do is we're going to finish it with some olive oil. Take it over to the oven. We're going to put it in the oven anywhere from, depends on your oven, it could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 25 minutes in your oven. Our sourdough bread's done, our focaccia's done, our pizza's done, and we added a little extra sourdough, that we finished up because we had too much dough. Whenever you're actually finishing the bread, you just always want to touch it and okay, of course you can use your cloth to hold this. I have no more feeling in my fingertips, but what you're looking for is that hollow sound. And that hollow sound signifies that your bread's done, and it'll be absolutely perfect for you. And then of course the focaccia, as you can see, is that the oil's baked into it. It's nice and crunchy. It'll be crunchy on the outside, nice and soft. As you can see, just beautiful. Oh, tastes amazing. We all know how good the pizza tastes. Hey, I'm Chef D. Won't you join me here at home in my new studio?
Join us if you're able. We'll be at the kitchen table, cooking with Chef T.